Hey guys, welcome back. In the last lecture, we worked on factory and specs for our STI models, and in this lecture, we will work on leveling up our RSpec practices. Here, we will work on writing specs for user model using association. We will also try to understand the difference between let and let with bang operator in RSpec. So let's start with the RSpec. First, open the user model specs and define a new context there for deleting a user. By the way, let me tell you that in this lecture, we will test the dependent destroy option for user model with user skill. So first we will create a user, then some skills, and then we will assign all these skills to our user object, and then we will delete the user. And after deleting the user, its skill count must be zero, and that is the thing that we need to test in this lecture. So define the context first or a new context. So here you can see that we already defined a context for creating a user. Now we need to define a context for deleting a user. Okay, so let's create the context here. Context when deleting a user. Okay, and then just end this context block. In this context, first define the user, some front end skill and some back end skill using let keyword. So what we can use here, let, and then we will use user, and then create user. Now our user has been created. Now we need to define few front end skills and few back end skills. So let's define let front end skill one, then create front end skill. Now similarly again define front end skill 2, 3. So we will do it like let's say front end skill 2, and here you need to pass an additional name because we have a uniqueness validation on the skill name. So when you call the create front end skill, is it will create the front end skill with name HTML, and for other front end skill we need to pass the custom name here, else our spec will get failed. Okay, so what name we can provide here, let's say CSS3, and the name to front end skill 3 here. First make it front end skill 3, and then the name value we can provide here, let's say name Twitter bootstrap. And then let's create a few backend skills. So let backend skill 1, and it must be create backend skill. And similarly like front end skill, we need to copy this line and we need to create few more backend skills. First created like let's say front backend skill 2, and here provide the name, let's say rails, and here we can convert it to backend skill 3, and now create backend skill and add a new name, that is let's say postgres skill. Okay, save it. Now we created a user here. Okay, you can see that we created this user, we created 3 front end skills, and we created 3 back end skills. Okay, now we need to assign these skills to user of this context by creating user skills using let keyword. Why I'm using the user skills, because you can see in the models that open the user model, and here you can see that user has many user skills and has many skills through user skills. So to create a skill for the user or to assign skills to the user, we first need to create instances of the user skill, which will take the argument of primary keys of both user and skills, so that we can create correct mapping between user and skills. Okay, so let's do that here. What we need to do here, first to use the let to create user skills. So we can use, let's say, sorry, let here user skill 1. Okay, and then what we need to do here, create user skill, create user skill, and then we need to assign it a user and a skill and a rating for that skill to that particular user. So what we can do here, user, then it will be the user of this context, and skill must be the front end skill 1, or any of the skill you can assign. So I'm using the front end skill 1. Okay, and then just assign a rating for this skill to this user. So rating, let's say 8. Now just copy this line and let's create assign each front end and back end skill to user. So paste this 6 times. Now let's say user skill 2, and here add front end skill 2, and then user skill 3, front end skill 3. Now user skill 4, and then backend skill, user skill 5, backend skill 1, and similarly backend skill 3 to user skill 3. Sorry, user skill 6. So let's try to understand what we did so far. So first we created a user in this spec, okay, in this context, and then we created 3 front-end skill and back-end skills, or in total we created 6 skill, out of which 3 are of front-end skills type and 3 are of back-end skills type. Then we created 6 user skills and map each front-end and back-end skills to that user. So now after saving this user into the database, the user have 6 skills. Okay, now we need to define an it block to write our test case. Okay, so we will define it after the last plate. So first define the it block, and what we need to do here, as I told you that we gonna test the dependent destroy callback here. So what dependent destroy will do, so that whenever a user get destroyed from the database, all of its user skills must be deleted, and there should be no mapping between skills and that user that is destroyed already. Okay, so what we need to write into this it block, that should destroy all user skills, should destroy all user skills, and then do. Now we need to write our specs in this it block. In this it block, first we will check that whether user skills or skills for the users are getting created or not. So add a debugger here and then write an expect statement. So into the it block, first add a debugger. We are just using this debugger to halt the execution of this spec, and now add expect, and then user dot skills count to eq, and the number must be 6, because we are creating 6 user skills here, so that when this user will be saved into the database, it should have 6 skills. Okay, now save the file and switch to the terminal and run the specs with specific line number, because all other user specs are already tested. However, if you wish, you can run all specs too, it totally your choice. So from where our test started, so our test started from the line number 24. So I will use run this spec from the line number 24. So now switch to the terminal and execute rspec spec models user specs, and then from line number 24. Now run this spec, and you will see that the debugger will halt the execution of the spec. Now what we need to check here, first access the user. So if you access the user that we defined in the let, that you will see that user with id1 has been created. Now what we need to check, we need to check all the skills assigned to this user. So let's do this by user dot skills.count, and when you run this command you will see that 0. However, we defined 6 skills, or we map 6 skills to this user, but we are getting in the spec output that is 0. Okay, now let's run or call any user skill. Okay, so let's call user skill 1 that we created using let. Here you can see that user skill 1, user skill 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So let's call user skill 1. Okay, now let's run the user dot skills dot count. You can see the output 1 now. Why this happens? Because we are using let. Okay, and as we already discussed when we started our spec, that let is lazily evaluated, and any method defined using let keyword is not available until its first call, but we can avoid this using let with bang operator as let not. Okay, so let's exit the debugger and replace all let by let with bang. So exit from the debugger, you can see that what our test result is expected 6 and got 1. So now let's change all this let by a let not or let with bang. So just select all these lets for this context only. Okay, now save this and run your specs again. So when you run your spec again, the debugger will halt the execution of the spec and now check the user. So you will get this user, and now user dot skills dot count, and you will see that the output is 6. And when you exit from the spec, you will still see that the spec is passed. One example, zero failure from the line number 24. So with let, with let using bang operator, we can get all these instances working for our it block. Okay, so this is the difference between let and let not, or let with bang operator. You need to make sure that in the previous specs, if you can see that we just use the let, but why? Because we are calling these methods inside the it block. We are not expecting that these methods must be preloaded into the it block. Why? Because we are calling into it block, and then that's why these are working fine. But here we need all these instances here, because we just want to count all the skills of the user. So we are not calling this user skill 1, user skill 2, user skill 3, 5, 4, 6, all these methods. Okay, so that's why we need to use let with bang operator here. And when we use that, it means we are preloading all the instances that we are creating using let with bang into our it block. Okay, so this is the difference between let and let with bang operator. But this is not only purpose for this lecture. What we need to test, we need to test the dependent destroy. So what we need to do here now, we need to destroy this user, and after deleting this user or destroying this user, we need to make sure that skills count for this user becomes 0. So let's destroy this user now. User dot destroy. Okay, and after deleting this user, what it should be, it should be 0. So just copy this line and place it here. Okay, so it should destroy all users. So expect user dot skills dot count to eq6. Then after getting all the user skills count, delete this user or destroy this user, and then expect again that user skills must be 0. Now save this file and switch to the terminal. Okay, and when you run this spec, we will get an error. Okay, I intentionally doing that. Here you can see active record invalid foreign key SQLite 3 constraint exception foreign key constraint failed. Why we are doing that? Because we deleted the user, but we did not use the dependent destroy callback inside the user model for user skills. Okay, and if user is deleted, then their referenced user skills will be in the database. That's why we are getting this exception foreign key constraint. Okay, so what we need to do here is to the user model, and in the user model just add dependent destroy. Okay, now run this spec, and this time your spec will get passed. So run this line and you will see that one example, zero failure. Okay, now if you want to check all the specs, run your all the user spec file, and you will see that four example and zero failures. Okay, that means our spec is working fine. And in this lecture we tried this using the association. Now, just to see the uses of let and let not, or let with bang operator, that when to use let and when not to use let with bang. So here you can see that we are not making calls to these user skill 1, user skill 2, user skill 3 inside the it block or before the it block. Okay, but we need this ready for our it block. So that's why if we are using let with bang operator with user skill 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, then it is fine. But here you can see we are calling user here. So we do not need to use let with bang here, so we can remove this let with bang. And here you can see that we are using calling this front end skill 1 for user skill 1, front end skill 2 for user skill 2, front end skill 3 for user skill 3. So we can remove let with sorry bang operator from these lets as well. And similarly we can remove the let sorry the bang operator from the let with backend skill 1 to 3 as well. Okay, now save the file and run your spec again. And when you run your spec, you will see the output is working fine. For example, zero failure. That means if your variables or methods that you define using let are not loaded before it block, you can use let with bang operator, else it is fine to use the let only. Okay, so you can see that actual difference here. Let is working, but if you remove bang operator from here, you will get an error. Okay, and that's all. In this lecture, we learn how to write specs for testing dependent destroy for association, and we also learn the difference between let and let with bang and when to use which. So try this lecture at your end, and we will meet into the next lecture. Till then, Tata, goodbye, take care, and stay safe, and happy Diwali to all of you.